How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and today we're taking a look at the cEDH 8K that was ran at SCGCON Las Vegas. This wasn't the first cEDH SCGCON event, but this was the first con where the cEDH event was the main event. This was the biggest prize at the event. Kind of exciting. Like, it's not, we've had plenty of cEDH 8Ks and 10Ks and maybe even bigger now, but it being the main event of such a like historic kind of important tournament series like SCGCON, it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty big deal. You know, it felt like a big historic thing, I guess, for me. We're gonna be taking a look at the meta breakdown, the decks to top 16, what happened, what went down, and whether or not MH3 had a big impact at this event. Let me know down below which of these deck lists was your favorite. What do you think about this sort of growth of cEDH? What do we think we're gonna see earlier? You know, are we ever getting Pro Tour Commander? That's kind of like, you know, people told us SCGCON would never happen and all these other things, but we get closer and closer every day. It's getting pretty wild. So let me know down below what you think about that. There were a couple other big tournaments this past weekend, one being the Atlanta 10K and another being the Top Deck Titans event. Let me know if you would like to see me cover those. They both have their own kind of differences, and the Atlanta 8K has really interesting top 16, though there were some weird technical things that went down in there. So let me know. Thank you as always to my amazing patrons over on Patreon, who with their support allow me to make all these videos that you guys get to enjoy, and they get great perks over there as well. And with all of that being said, let's go ahead and hop into it. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. This is one of the best ways you can support the channel, and again, it's just free stuff. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. So our meta breakdown doesn't look too crazy. This was a 122 player event. 8 Tymna Kraums honestly seems pretty dang low for an event of this size. So it looks like it wasn't too top heavy in terms of the representation. We see Tymna Kraum with 8, Kinnan with 6, Rogside with 5, and then we have a bunch of 3s like Sisse, Horvold showing up, Crick. Because SCG uses their own kind of goofy deck submission thing, we do lose a couple to unknown commanders. So like some of these numbers might not be exact, but overall the meta breakdown of like roughly how popular things are is going to be pretty accurate. And it looks like there's a lot of diversity. There's like a lot of 1s and 2-ofs. Pretty notable that we're not going to be looking at any Sisses in the top 16, which has been a crazy consistent performer and very popular. No Magdas in the top as well, which is surprising for if a lot of Magda pilots show up, but if they don't, it's not the most popular deck in the world, but it has just been a super consistent performer. Nothing else too crazy showing out in terms of the meta breakdown though. So let's get into those decks. First up, we are looking at Urza Lord High Artificer getting 16th place. This is a deck that, you know, has a lot of history. I haven't covered it a lot because it hasn't had a lot of tournament success recently. It's pretty known for doing things like, you know, feeding dockside, and there have been some meta calls where like the stacks your elements of the deck aren't really at their best recently, but let's see what we got here. So just in the creature package, we can already see 2 MH3 inclusions. We've got Volatile Stormdrake, which is the new Gilded Drake variant. I've thought a lot about this card versus Gilded Drake, and I think they are both pretty defendable in terms of just, if you want this effect, the upside of one isn't vastly better than the upside of the other. Cool thing with like Volatile Stormdrake in this deck is if there's like a collector oof in play, you can take the oof and then choose not to pay the energy and destroy it. Gilded Drake against those kind of symmetrical stacks pieces doesn't really do anything for you. Gilded Drake is just a little bit better at taking out those bigger threats that hit the table, things like that, and potentially getting you more advantage. We also have Hydroelectric Specimen, which is a MDFC that doesn't have a crazy amount of text. It is pretty nice in a deck like Urza, where it can enter and, you know, take a Swords to Plowshares, basically be a creature that can counter a spell like that, which can be pretty hard to deal with. Like I said, we have the Stormdrake and the regular Gilded Drake here. So choosing to do both, I think in a blue deck, you can do that. And a deck 3 higher color piles, like for instance in Rock Thras, I'm really torn between the two, where I think Gilded Drake has been slightly better than I imagined Stormdrake will be, but I might try Stormdrake. And then Forensic Gadgeteer is a pretty powerful card in Urza, where every artifact you cast gives you a second artifact, and it also makes your artifact abilities cost 1 less, so it can be another way to potentially go infinite if you don't have access to Urza. No kind of stacksy piece, protection, clones, nothing else standing out too much. Reality Chip is a pretty powerful card with Urza, giving you a ton of advantage once you get tons of mana rolling. Same with Kitten, can go pretty crazy. Sorceries, we've got Artifact Tutors and then an MDFC as well as Time Twister. This is the type of deck that will be doing Twister loops potentially to kill the opponents, let you buy back some cards you may have lost access to throughout the game. Instance, we've got a ton of counter spells, including the new Strix Serenade, which seems like a pretty natural fit for a deck like Urza. Going as deep as cards like Stubborn Denial, which may seem like it's not always on, but like you can look at it like Niv Mizzet or the other like Paco Halden decks where like they have a commander that's so big, Stubborn Denial becomes 1 mana counter target non-creature spell. Urza is just, he's not the ferocious one, it's the token that he brings along with him. Going as deep as even counter spell, so pretty deep. And then also we have Sink into Stupor, which is another MDFC that is an untapped land on the back. Pretty free include in a monocolor deck. And it's one thing I really like about these cards being added is they're so free to add and just punch up those really low color decks. And then we're going to have a whole bunch of artifacts. We've got just tons and tons of artifacts to make mana with, have some kind of utility use. You like Tormar's Crypt to exile graveyards, Grafdigger's Cage to shut out those creature decks and those breach decks, Codex Shredder to potentially mill out our opponents. Also being able to buy back something once you've gone infinite. The keys being able to net you a bunch of mana with like a Grim Monolith or do something crazy with an Ice-Crown Scepter or whatever. The One Ring, do lots of good stuff. Very good Sensei Divining top deck. And then the kind of stack C pieces, right, that Urza is known for. There's no Winter Orb. We don't see Winter Moon, the new one. We do have Vexing Bauble. Curious how it's played in this deck. So it's 1 mana, taps for blue when Urza's in play. Pretty great. We do have a decent amount of zeros. We have 8 just here in the artifacts. Force of Will, MBT, Force of Negation, Fierce. Decent amount of free counter magic and Pact of Negation that we'd like to keep up. Urza specifically is probably going to have the mana lying around to crack the bauble if it needs to anyways, or even be able to hardcast some of these spells, potentially if they're going big enough. The flexibility of this card to just be able to deploy it when you know it's fine and then crack it if needed does seem like a lot. Like this seems like a deck that could pretty naturally use it to lock people out, especially you dump this early and then it's just a 1 mana rock in the mid game before you crack it or if you need to or whatever. So other stack Seer effects, we've got Torpor Orb, ETBs don't trigger. You don't get your construct. Oh well, that's not the biggest part of Urza anyways. It cuts off your Gilded Drakes, but we're not really a creature deck. We have 13 creatures. A couple of them have ETBs. It's probably more important in a deck like this to stop your opponent from doing the initial dockside than for you to get to copy their dockside. So then we have Static Orb, which with its up-to-date text, you know how great this card is in Urza. On the end step, tap it down, you get to fully untap. There's not really any worry of shutting off people's ability to interact or do this or do that. Like this is just a great way to keep people from developing while you just take control of the game. Ways to go infinite. It's kind of our main way to win. We got the Rings of Brighthearth to combo with our big ol' rocks. Power Artifact, which can let us do like the big untaps with Basalt Monolith or Grim Monolith. And then Mystic Remora, Ristic Study Counterbalance. Makes a ton of sense in this kind of deck. Lands 24, but it's really 27 because we get all these MDFCs now. Get lots of utility lands. You get to run new things like Fomori Vault, which is looking really good in this kind of deck. And then we got the Talon Gates of Madara. This is what I'm really interested in putting into one of my decks. Enters, it phases out a creature, and that's just on a land. You just put the land into play. Creature phases out. Collector Oof is phased out. Whatever. Don't even have to cast the spell. It's pretty wild. At 15th, we've got a Tymna Kraum list, and it's looking like a Displacer Kitten Teferi list, so that is a little bit different, stands out. Other notable cards, we do have the Fairy Mastermind as a decent little value engine. Delny to enable some of our other engines and our creatures and such, or Tymnas and that. Displacer Kitten, like I said, we're doing the Kitten thing. It's not really been a combo I've been sold on. I actually kind of like the decks that have Teferi and no Kitten, but Kitten can do some crazy stuff. And we have Talion again as a creature value engine. Sorceries, really, really notable. We are on the Peer into the Abyss, so we're going pretty big. This is 7 mana win the game. I don't know that I've ever seen a resolved Peer into the Abyss not lead to a win. It's pretty much impossible. Not a card that's been too popular lately, but always an option. And maybe they're valuing like some of the rituals. We'll see. Instance, we've got Offer You Can't Refuse, which is a little bit of a ritual at home, Calling the Weak makes a lot of sense in a Peer into the Abyss deck. Only on the 1 red blast, is on Spell Snare as well. Swan Song here, no Strix's Serenade or Strix Serenade, whatever. We do have the Born Upon a wins. Snapback showing up as well. That's a different include. It's not super popular at the moment, but does pop up. And then pretty standard stuff. Of course, we're on the Nas. We're a Nas pure deck. Let's go. You love to see it. A notable card not included here is Mystical Tutor, which is a card in general I think is starting to see less play as it can be really awkward. In the early game, it's usually like the most dead top deck tutor if you're not immediately jamming a win or just scared of what's happening at the table. Like, it's a little awkward, and I think its status as a staple across every single blue deck is being questioned. I do specifically like it in Tymna Kraum because you have so many draw engines that come into play that being able to respond to the trigger of a Kraum or a Ristic Study with a mystical tutor to be able to find the interaction that you need. That has come up so often. I don't think I would cut mystical tutor from a deck like Tymna Kraum, but in a deck like Kinnan or Rogthras or maybe some others that are a little bit more creature heavy, and sometimes the mystical tutor is just, it's almost always there to just tutor for some other kind of tutor. It can be a little awkward. Artifacts, 14. We've got a bunch of mana, Wishclaw Talisman, and we are on the One Ring. So One Ring, PETA, and Ad Nauseam in our list. And some other big enchant. Man, our Nos is going to be a little, we got the main ones you got to run, Smothering Tithe and Trouble in Pair. So we've got a lot of like 4 mana plus value engines. And then a 27 land mana base with the kind of greedy Manamo include. Next up, we got Yeva. Second time I've had to cover this year, I believe. Mono green doing the work. So what we're working with, we got Invasion. Usually what we're going to see is a whole lot of creatures. 43, you can see a whole lot of creatures in a deck like Yeva where your commander is enabling your creatures to be better. Creature combos like Quirion Ranger and Ashaya. Hate pieces like Collector Oof because we're going to be usually using creature mana instead of artifact mana. And then just tons of ways to break mana. I mean, look at all these dorks. We've got the new Fanatic of Ronus as a dork that in a deck like this probably has a decent chance of being online. We do have a few larger creatures and ways to buff up our creatures, you know, something like a Defiler of Vigor, Ashaya, Teamer Sabertooth, Kogla. Like, there's a decent amount. Oh, we got Surek and Goreclaw. Okay, I'll have to take a look at that. Another new option we see from MH3 is Eladamri Corvec Doll. It's the core, the Vec, and the Doll. You can look at the top card of your library and cast creatures from the top of it. You can spend a green and tap it to tap 2 untapped creatures you control, reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library, and if you reveal a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, which can be pretty busted, right? This is a play that you could potentially do as early as turn 1, probably more of like a turn 2 Eladamri is what I would expect, you know, land dork Eladamri, and then just from then on have the potential to put anything into play. And Eladamri really can help you kind of break the creature heaviness of the deck, right? If you have a whole lot of mana, nothing to do with it, it's really nice to have like a good engine like Eladamri. Lots of different ways to get infinite mana, potentially draw our deck. Disciple of Freyalise, a new cool option with that, where if you're able to get infinite mana, you can cast your commander, Disciple of Freyalise, sack the commander, draw cards, and then if you have something like a Teamer Sabertooth, like a way to get Disciple back into hand, keep doing that over and over as a way. And like, this is on the back of a land. Or just potentially you could just sack a really large creature. This is just such a free include on an untapped land. It's a really nice option for mono green. This is just a cool deck. Some options that I'm not as familiar with. Surek and Goreclaw, 6 mana, 6/5 trample. Other creatures have trample. When a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it, gains haste until end of turn, beating people to death. And then Woodcaller Automaton. I'm guessing we're going to prototype it most of the time for 2 green. When it enters, if you cast it, untap target land, becomes a tree folk with haste and base power and toughness equal to its Woodcaller Automaton's power and toughness is still a land. It's going to let you do things like untap a Gaia's Cradle, which is pretty nice. One card I would kind of have maybe expect to see here is, I think it's Sowing Mycospawn, which is 4 mana on cast, find a land, put it into play. Bunch of ways to get creatures into play. That's the green creature thing we're doing. You see it in our instance. Summoner's Pact, Crop Rot. Again, we're probably going to have a decent amount of utility lands. Smuggler's Surprise is a cool one that you can just spend 6 mana and put 2 creatures into play in instant speed. Any 2 creatures from your hand. Pretty ridiculous. Then we've got some interaction, tutors, that kind of thing. Artifacts. Again, we're not going to go super heavy. Mainly going to use our creature mana. We've got the best artifact ramp as well as the One Ring and Soul Cauldron, which is pretty nifty in this deck. We have tons and tons of activated abilities on your creatures. Really wild if you ever get to do like Fanatic of Ronus under a Soul Cauldron with a 4/4 or something in play, and all your creatures that have the counters on them tapping for 4 green. That's going to be absurd. Enchantments. We got the Concordant Crossroads, which is spooky in some pods, but for the most part, you're the deck most likely to be able to break it. Birthing Ritual, which is a pretty cool card in a deck this heavy on creatures. It's really hard to whiff on. You get to look at the top 7 at the end of your turn, and then you can sack a creature and put one into play that costs X or less, where X is 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value. So anything that costs, like if the thing costs 2, you can put anything that costs 3 or less into play. Earthcraft, which is just powerful. We don't need Squirrel's Nest, whatever. This is just a busted card. And then Survival of the Fittest, of course. And then we are on 27 lands. We've got the Emergent Zone Crop Rot for our Crop Rot package, Dryad Arbor, Cradle, Yavamaya, which can really help us with the untap land stuff. When our Cradle is a forest, being able to untap a forest. Same with Nykthos. And then we do have the Talon Gates and Shifting Woodland. Lots of new green options. Urza's Cave as a way to put one of these lands into play. Horizon of Progress also lets you put land into play at any point. Green got a lot of new tools. We didn't see a card like 6 in here. Maybe that's not a card that really makes a lot of sense with this kind of deck. It doesn't really fit the Yeva instant speed thing because 6 only gives you access to those cards on your turn. So maybe that's just a little awkward and doesn't really line up with what the deck's trying to do. But really cool to see this deck get another result. It's pretty sick. Welcome to TopDeck.gg, your community's home for everything competitive Magic has to offer. Whether you're hosting an event, playing for a huge prize, or trying to advertise your store to thousands of players, we've got you covered. Using intuitive pairing software, playing Magic is a breeze. All your players have to do is sign up online, then scan the QR code in store. Give your competitors the gift of perfect information as their bracket updates in real time. Then, when the match is decided, our self-reporting software saves you time and leaves paper match slips in the past. Leave the heavy lifting to us so your community can sit back, relax, and have a great day of playing Magic. All right, we're looking at another Friends Forever deck. This time, Wernog and Cecily. So we're Tymna Kraum colors. What are we doing here? We've got the Teferi and the Kinnan. Some of the good stuff, TNK cards. Goblin Engineer. We are a deck that can go infinite with something like Cloudstone Curio. So I expect to see something like that there. And then also, once you're on Engineer, cards like Defense Grid, they start to make more sense, right? Hullbreaker Horror, same kind of deal. We have an infinite outlet in the command zone with Wernog. So makes a lot of sense to be able to try to go infinite. Braids can really take advantage of things like the clues that we might have lying around with Wernog and just other bits and pieces of junk lying around. A lot of time braids, if you just have any kind of junky thing in play and sacrifice it, you're going to get to draw 3 cards because no one wants to sacrifice their mana rocks or their creatures in play. We do have the Git Probe, meaning we're maybe leaning a little quicker, a little spookier, right? You know, we got the J Will as well. That lines up with that. Savine's Wreck, of course, we're going to be an Underworld Breach deck. Beseech the Mirror showing up, not the most common in 4-color decks, but there is a lot of like payoffs at that 4 mana value. We are a Dockside combo deck. We're a Displacer Kitten Teferi combo deck, being able to beseech for Teferi, then start with your Kitten, or beseech for Cloudstone Curio, and then start your Dockside loop. We have the Orum's Chant, so doubling up on the silence type effects. For the most part, pretty typical for a high color pile like this. Most of the free and cheap interaction. Trickbind does stand out. That's not a card you see a ton of, and usually when it does show up, it's more with the decks like Talion and that are leaning more control-y. But it can be nice to have something that just always works, like Trickbind, like almost nothing gets to stop a card like this, so pretty nice. And then we have Intuition, which in this deck has a little bit more flexibility, like I said, because we can do something like Intuition for Underworld Breach, Savine's Wreck, and Cloudstone Curio or something. Artifacts, whole bunch of mana, the Cloudstone Curio, the Wishclaw Talisman, and we are on the One Ring. We are a Nas deck, of course. No PETA this time though. Don't get too hurt, but we are a Necro deck, which I really like again in this kind of deck. You're going to be doing things like Beseech the Mirror in a 4-color deck, and especially Teferi. If you get to go Teferi and Necropotence in the same turn, that's so hot. We do see the Dress Down. Can be awkward in a deck like this where we are trying to do a creature combo thing potentially. We can bounce it, of course, if we're doing Hullbreaker stuff. And then we've got the Rhystic Mystic Breach, of course. 27 lands. I don't expect a new land in the set. We are on Undercity Sewers, which you don't see too many of in this like higher color pile, as well as Urza's Saga and Inventor's Fair. Taking a look at our artifacts again, our Saga package doesn't really have a specific thing it's trying to hit. Mana Rocks and LED, and then the Inventor's Fair does let us go get Cloudstone Curio. Potentially we could get the One Ring or Wishclaw Talisman. Love the Friends Forever decks. I'm always a really big fan of the Stranger Things decks. They just do a cool version of high color piles. Next up, we're looking at another Tymna Kraum. Lots of these colors lying around. Nothing really notable in the creature package. There is no Drannith Magistrate. We haven't seen a single Drannith today, I don't think. Other than that, this is basically the bread and butter, bread milk farm version of the deck. Though another Teferi Enjoyer. This is kind of more what I like to see Teferi with no Kitten. Sorceries, we are on the Reanimate, which has been a little bit less popular recently, I feel like. We're on the One Wheel. We do have a Toxic Deluge. Instance. Lots of interaction around the Culling the Weak. Dispel. We do have a Mystical Tutor player here. I kind of like Path along with Swords in Tymna Kraum. I think there's just enough creature combo decks around that having this kind of effect is pretty nice. Lots of Dockside combo decks where doing a Path or a Swords in response to the ETB is going to save you a lot of trouble in the long run. Kind of what we expect, although no One Ring this time. So just a whole bunch of Mana Rocks and Wishclaw Talisman. And then enchantments. We do have the Smothering Tithe. First of these we've seen. I have absolutely loved Smothering Tithe in Tymna Kraum. It's pretty busted. You basically don't have to worry about mana for the rest of the game. Tapping out for it's not the problem, but if you have no interaction, no draw engine in play, and you just slam Smothering Tithe, you are just sitting there hoping to untap because you just have no ability to do anything. So you have to be pretty responsible with Tithe versus Rhystic Mystic. Always kind of has that potential to dig you into interaction in the early game if you need it, or at least threaten people to not want to push because they know that you're going to potentially draw into interaction and that you might already have some. And then we are on 26 lands, Fire of Industry, no super spicy include in the mana base. All right, we got Larry Park on Najeela, usually shows up in these top 16s. But there's some cool stuff here. Najeela's been experimented with. We saw like Memo with the Chatterfang bringing it back. So here we've got the Chatterfang, the Cutzel, the Samut. Not every deck is on, you know, X number of dorks. This one's on 3 here, seems about right. Plus the Tinderwall and Ragavan if those count. New card inclusion. So we've got Ajani Nakatl Pariah, which is a 2-mana 1/2 warrior that creates a 2/1 cat warrior when it enters. So you get 2 warriors right off the bat. And then when one of your cats dies, then you exile Ajani and return it into play as the backside of which is a planeswalker, which you can +2 to put +1/+1 counter on cats. You 0 it to make another cat warrior. And then when you do, and if you control a red permanent other than Ajani, he deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control. So for instance, you know, somebody blocks my warrior, whatever, warrior dies, my cat warrior, Ajani's gonna flip. Then if I have like Najeela in play, I'm gonna be able to use that 0, make another warrior, and then for all my warriors in play, or any creature, but we're going to make a lot of warriors, I'm going to be able to just blow something up with the Ajani ability. So actually seems like a pretty solid inclusion in a deck like Najeela. And then we also have Warren Soul Trader, which is a pretty interesting one. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, create a treasure token. One, just on the front side of it, like the most obvious, you can just sacrifice the warriors you make to make mana. I mean, do an Najeela turn, swing out with this in play, sack like 4 warriors, and then make 4 treasure tokens. That's pretty sick. You can also get to a point where because Najeela gives lifelink, if you have enough warriors swinging and you're able to net enough, even if you sacrifice 5 a turn, do an activation, and you're able to keep doing that, you're going to be gaining life as you go and you'll be able to kill the table. But again, it can also just like, you know, swing in. You can play this for 3 and then the turn you play it, make 4 or 5 treasures and it's free real estate. Especially good with Chatterfang too. You got a whole bunch of dudes lying around. You can make a lot of treasure tokens out of this. Pretty big upside. Also can synergize with something like Grim Hireling. Sorceries. We've got no wheels, a couple tutors, kind of Najeela cards we sort of expect. We're on the Summoner's Pact. We're also on crop rotation, so maybe we're a bit more likely to be a Cradle deck. That's pretty cool. Intuition, of course, and our Naz. Eladamri's Call, so we are doing that. Pretty similar to a lot of Najeela kind of builds. The crop rot sticks out the most, and then not every deck Summoner's Pacts, but I've noticed it seems like stocks are kind of up on that card in Najeela. Artifacts, a whole bunch of rocks, your LED, your Wishclaw Talisman, kind of what we expect. Enchantments, we got a cool one. We got a new one. We've got Chthonian Nightmare. Lets you do dockside loops to get infinite mana to then go off with Najeela, right? We do infinite loops with Dockside Extortionist and one of our other creatures in the graveyard, and then we're able to net infinite treasures. And then whenever we go to combat with Najeela, it doesn't matter how many warriors we have, as long as we can get in, press the button on Najeela, and then keep untapping and hitting people. Eventually we get enough warriors where we can get through on everybody, and we have infinite treasures, so we got it. We can do it. Cool too with Grim Hireling, because we can just blow up every creature in play. And then lands, we are on the Cradle. We're at 28 lands, a bunch of duels, and we're on the Shifting Woodland as well, which is a pretty nifty target for our crop rotation. I haven't got to activate it yet, but I've played the card a lot and it's been active. It's been ready for me to use it to win, but cool card with all the creature combo-y stuff we're going to end up doing. Cool to see Najeela experimenting with some of these new cards. We've got Stella Lee, which is a greedy Izzet Storm deck that tries to pass on turn 3 with instant speed win. Cabal. You guys kind of know the deal with Stella Lee so far, right? Has the ability to just win whenever, combos with a million different cards, but we're looking to see what new stuff there might be and how the deck's progressing. So let's take a look. We've got kind of good stuffy cards and then some of the new cards. Hydroelectric Specimen, which we saw earlier, makes a lot of sense in a deck like Stella Lee where people are going to prioritize killing Stella. Pinnacle Monk, again on a land, pretty free. Just buy back an instant or sorcery on a pretty expensive body, but again, like you're just going to get into games where this comes up where you're not ready to fire off and you just spend your mana on a Pinnacle Monk and hold up some interaction and pass. Or you just have so much mana that Pinnacle Monk just lets you refire an instant and sorcery to get your Stella Lee count up. So sorceries, we've got tutors, cards like Personal Tutor, Gamble, Strike It Rich, Finale of Promise is really good as a kind of 1-card way to just get Stella Lee triggered. Twister for our looping and our wheeling, because we have all the wheels here other than Misfortune, it looks like, so not going quite that deep. J-Will, we're on the Warrior's Oath, not doing 2 of those effects, okay. Twisted Fealty, one of our potential combo cards. Seagate Restoration again, we're not on Oz deck, so this is pretty free. Not going too crazy on the really derpy cantrip effects in the sorcery slot. lot. Instants, we're going to go a little bit derpier because these let us get instant speed wins. Like the Cerulean Wisp, the Crimson Wisps. Yeah, they're not the best cards in the world to run, but when they go infinite with your commander, it's a little bit different. What does Shore Up do? Give hexproof? Okay. You can get slowly infinitely big with hexproof and untap it. Okay. Mainly looking for new cards because you're going to see lots of untap effects that Stella Lee can go infinite with, draw card effects that you can do it with, like that kind of thing. We sort of expect those. Idle Boar is that on a free spell. We do see Sink into Stupor, which is another one of those free to run MDFCs where, you know, on the back is just a land. Not seeing any other new cards. Still, again, lots of interaction cantrips, the kind of cards that go infinite with Stella Lee, and then ways to keep it around or push a win like Final Fortune, Mystical Tutor. Artifacts. We do have the defense grid, which I love to see, and then a bunch of rocks, and you're the One Ring. Enchantments. This is our first power balance deck. Kind of makes sense here, right? Like Stella Lee, the problem with some of these decks with power balance is if you cast junky spells randomly, it can't do a lot for you. But if they're not cards you're desperate to keep up on your turn, if you get like 2 triggers and you can just Stella Lee and actually get an impulse draw, that is actually turning power balance into kind of just a actual draw engine. Plus you can just like, oh, you flipped into my Heuristic Study, my Mystic Grimoire. Like you can just flip into good permanent based things that are strong, or, you know, a counter spell in response to somebody's spell that you might want to counter. But I do kind of like that Stella Lee makes the card a bit more of a proper value engine, and also like on your turn, if people try to interact with you, whether the spells do anything or not, just getting your Stella Lee count up for free, I mean, that's gonna be good in some number of games. And then the mana base, 22 actual lands, but we get 4 free spells because of MDFCs. Arena of Glory, new one, which is pretty hot because it lets Stella Lee come into play with haste, just on a red land that's very likely to enter untapped. So I really like that in the list. Yeah, Stella Lee getting some new upgrades. MH3, baby. Next up, we've got Teferi Temporal Archmage cEDH. This is a deck that shows up every now and then. I think with the same pilot usually, that just shows up and does the thing. It just has its win con with Teferi and the Chain Veil. Very slim number of creatures. So we got Tezzeret to tutor for an artifact. Makes a lot of sense in this kind of artifact combo deck. Trinket Mage, Kitten, really powerful combination if you get them in play, where you just get to put all your 0s and 1s into play. Phyrexia Metamorph, no Fimage, no duplicate. Urza and Hullbreaker Horror showing up here, which is going to let us draw through our deck, because once we net infinite mana, we'll just play Teferi, plus it, play another spell, bounce Teferi, play Teferi, spell, plus, and then get through our deck. Sorceries, kind of cantripy things. Savor the Moment is an extra turn, right? Or we skip the untap, which is kind of cool because Teferi lets us kind of have an untap step with it. I kind of like that. Lots of extra turn effects. We're really going big on that. I guess that's how we're really going to try to break our commander. And then instants, we've got some card selection tutors. We've got tons of interaction. Psych Griff, Fierce, War of Invention as another tutor. Nexus of Fate to keep doing those extra turns. Intellectual Offering, 4 and a blue. Choose an opponent, you and that player draw 3 cards. Choose an opponent, untap all non-land permanents you control, on an permanents that opponent control. So you're getting like the best of both worlds, where you give someone with no mana, you give them cards, and you give someone with no cards mana, I guess. It's kind of the ideal way to use the card. And then you get all of it. And then artifacts, a whole bunch. That's our whole thing. God, the secret, that looks so sick. Tons of rocks and hate pieces like Cage and Torpor Orb. We've got Sculpting Steel even to enter and copy other artifacts. Rings of Bright Hearth to combo. Chain Veil being our main combo with Teferi, where we're able to activate him multiple times, untap the Chain Veil, and then keep that going. Trinisphere even to lock people out. That's going to do a pretty good job. Throne of Eldraine, a card I've seen a little bit less of, I think, since it came out. I know a lot of monocolor decks were trying it, but I feel like I've seen it not even really show up in those that often. Enchantments, we got the Copy Artifact, Power Artifact. Makes sense. We're doing that kind of stuff, right? Basalt, Grim Monolith, and then Mystic Ristic, of course. Lands, 27. So we didn't see too many of the new MDFCs. For some of these players, it could just be they didn't get to pick one up on the day of the event. Maybe they'll be on it soon, or maybe they don't value it. But I feel like especially in mono blue, like sacking an island, you know, having one less island for an extra spell seems pretty good. Next up, we got Kaalia of the Vast, which is a really cool Mardu list that has a decent bit of history of getting pretty good results, mainly by this player. Mardu's just always cool anyways. So what does Kaalia specifically let us do? Put in those dragons and demons. Which ones are we running? We've got Doom Whisperer, Hoarding Broodlord, Razaketh, and Vilis to all be able to put into play for free with Kaalia. Not so much with Doom Whisperer, but there have definitely been dedicated decks trying to put these other 3 big ones into play. Doom Whisperer is a nice bit of synergy with cards like Underworld Breach, of course. So other creatures we got. Children of Corliss is going to let us do that Doom Whisperer thing really well, where we're going to pay a whole bunch of life, mill most of our library, and then Children Center of Corliss to get the life back to keep going. Can also work with Vilis or Razaketh if you're using enough life, or just like a post-Nas situation. Magda means we're probably a Bolus to Citadel deck. I know this deck has been previously. We are on Dualcaster Mage. So we got Skirk Prospector. Makes me think we're more likely on some kind of way to loop Dockside. We'll see. We'll see. So we're on Faithless Looting, Gamble, ways to loot through the deck a bit. Reanimate, of course, makes a lot of sense in this kind of deck. Grim Tutor, we got the double wheels, Misfortune and Fortune. Beseech the Mirror here, kind of expect that. Praetor's Grasp, Savine's Wreck. Lethal Demolition being one that stands out. Immediately, it's pretty cool with Skirk Prospector. Destroy an artifact if you control it, make 3 1/1 goblins. That's pretty hot with Skirk Prospector, but we'll see. We'll see if there's any other overlap. I'm kind of expect there's got to be something for only one to destroy, right? Instance, new card from Thunder Junction I saw put in some work this past weekend was Final Showdown, mainly for that 1 and a white, all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. Getting that dress down kind of effect, not on a permanent, is pretty sick. Running Sacrifice, usually going to see that with Hoarding Broodlord lines, probably going to see Saw in Half as well. Notably, we didn't see Twin Flame, any of that, so our Dualcaster Maging is either on someone else's spell or is on Saw in Half. Mausoleum Secrets is 1 in a black, search library for a black card, convert a mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. Tutor that kind of scales throughout the game. And also, like, just early on, if you get 1 or 2 things in the yard, you can get most of the spells. Flare of Duplication, another new one. It makes cards like Ragavan, Skirk, Dockside's gonna be good anyways. Magda, Dualcaster. If I ever get a sack of Simian Spirit Guide to a Flare, I'll let you know. But like, you're not that likely to do it on Kaalia. But if you've already done the Kaalia thing, sure. And if if you ever get a copy of super impactful spell, it'd be worth it. If you have like some kind of really busted card, like being able to double up in Tombs or Savine's Rex or whatever, like Beseech the Mirrors, Demonic Tutors, like your own busted spells is also an option. So that's a pretty strong one. No Bolus of Citadel here. Okay. Does also let us, like the Magda can let us get Defense Grade, Grinding Station, One Ring, stuff like that. And can just use, Magda can just be used for mana too. You don't have to do the big activation thing. Also didn't mention it, but we are an Entomb deck because we're kind of a semi-dedicated Reanimator list. And you can see more of that here. We got Static Prison, card I expected 100% to slam into these kind of decks that were already running things like Portable Hole, Animate Dead, Necromancy, Chthonian Nightmare. Lets us get infinite mana, can let us get infinite ETBs of something like a Bowmaster to kill the table, get infinite treasures, use Magda, get all our artifacts, get infinite Hoarding Broodlords, that wins the game. That's pretty sick. Of course, Necropotence, Breach. And we're on 25 lands. I know some of these have gone pretty low. Some of them have gone very, very low. We're on the Cavern of Souls. White-black Surveil land showing up here. It doesn't seem like we're running any of the other ones. And we're an Emergent Zone deck as well, so that's pretty sick. Then 7th place, we got another Stella Lee. Already a decently different creature package. We see things like Ledger Shredder coming in. We got the Fimmage. Storm Kiln Artist is pretty nice doing the stormy stuff. Bergie. Sorceries, we do see more of the derpy cantripy effects, the Sleight of Hand, Serum Visions, Preordain. Solve the Equation as a relatively expensive tutor. And then the instance, we see a lot of similar cards, your Shore Ups, your Interaction, maybe a little bit different with a card like Spell Pierce. Stifle showing up here. Okay. So maybe like a little bit more leaning slightly more reactive. We don't see like Trick Bind, right? We're going as deep as Negate though. Mana Drain, Arcane Denial, lots of counter spells. Artifacts, we're on the ring, we're on top. Bunch of rocks, Dress Down, Breach, Rhystic, Mystic. There was no wheels here, right? So yeah, we're not doing Wheel of Fortune. We're not doing Twister Loops. Again, non-proxy event. Those are really expensive cards. Could be a factor, but I mean, like, Intuition's expensive too, but there's nothing in the format really close to Time Twister. And then the mana base, right? Is there even a Volk Island? Right, so like when I see like no Volk Island here, then you know there's like some consideration for budget. Volk Island isn't like absolutely busted in this deck. It's not absolutely necessary, so that's totally fine for an event like this to be able to make sure to bring your deck here. And it's really cool that a deck like Stella Lee can have a relatively budget build and be brought and get 7th place at a really competitive event like this. We have just some utility lands, Saga, Emergent Zone. Probably would have liked to see the Arena of Glory, but again, maybe wasn't able to pick it up on the day of. Stella Lee getting 2 top 16s, one of them a relatively budget-friendly version. Then we're rocking another Tymna Kraum, this one on Archivist of Ogma as our, and Fairy Mastermind actually, as our random sort of value engine creatures of choice. Still no Drannith Magistrate. Drannith getting no love at this event. And that's kind of been something I talked about not too long ago, is people were thinking about cutting it, and we see that result of that. Sorceries, we're on the Reanimate, we are on the Wheel of Fortune and a Windfall. No board wipes. Instants, Culling the Weak, Dark Writ, Miscast showing up here, Swords, no path, only the 1 red blast, Final Fortune. I'm kind of skimming, I know. Snapback showing up here. Is that over Snap itself? Actually, over Snap. We usually see it in conjunction with Snap because Snap is so kind of busted as a free spell. But running it over Snap here, nothing too surprising in the artifacts. It's basically just like, is there a One Ring when you're looking at Tymna Kraum in terms of the artifacts? Like, yeah, some people will run like 2 talismans, or which ones they choose to run will be different. But for the most part, this is basically what the artifact package looks like. Sometimes there's a One Ring. Duress Down showing up again, so seeing a little bit more play of this event. Then 28 lands, maybe 1 higher than some of the other TNK lists. Nothing really standing out about the mana base. Not rocking any new cards, probably just brought their list and ran it as is. Worked for them, we still got them top 16. And then we've got 5th place, we've got Grixis Pirate Pivot, which is Malcolm Vial Smasher. Creatures. So there's lots of different ways you can build this. You can build it more mid-rangey. You can build like a turbo deck that has a creature combo with Glenhorn Buccaneer. You got plenty of options. Magd is showing up, which is just pretty great card again when you're making treasures. Spellskite to protect our creature stuff. Glenhorn is one of our wins. And then 2 more grindy advantage cards. So the Niv Mizzet isn't necessarily grindy, but it like destroys a kind of grindy game. And the Talion, both pretty great draw engines. Sorceries. So we're on the last chance. So we've been seeing a few more people choosing to run one of the sorcery speed Final Fortune effects along with Final Fortune. Tutors. We've got the Reanimates, which makes sense in this kind of deck, and works really well with a card like Lively Dirge, which is a spree card that lets you search the library for a card and put it into your graveyard, and then you can also spree and return up to 2 creatures with total mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This can just be like, go get Glenhorn Buccaneer, put it into play. In general, for a deck that has any sort of utility for getting creatures and putting them into play, I think Lively Dirge is pretty sick. I know Eric's super high on it in Corvold right now. Praetor's Grass, J-Will, Grim Tutor, stapley kind of cards. About the Entomb, which makes a lot of sense with when you're running stuff like Lively Dirge, running Reanimate. We might be on more Reanimation to get like that Niv into play, or the Glenhorn or Italian, whatever. Snap Daze showing up here as well. So pretty low to the ground in terms of how we want to interact. Nothing new in terms of MH3 cards here. We are a Nas deck, of course. We're on the defense grid. We're on the One Ring, bunch of rocks. And then, yeah, enchantment. So we are on the Animate Dead. We're on the Chthonian Nightmare, which doesn't really win the game for our deck. We don't have other than like we've got Bowmasters and Dockside in the graveyard, or one in play, one in the graveyard, and we loop between them. We don't have like an outlet with Malcolm, but Chthonian Nightmare is going to let us just buy back our creatures over and over, just exchange one for like Glenhorn Buccaneer if they kill it or counter it. And then we've got the Breach, Curiosity, which is just a decent value engine when you're trying to get in on somebody and can win the game with Niv Mizzet. And then the first Necro Dominance of the event. So we got Necropotence, of course, in the Necro Dominance. It is a bit weaker, but if you're trying to push and you have really cheap win cons and you want this effect a lot, this is the kind of card, right? This is the kind of card you run. If you're already heavy on the extra turn or Born Upon a Wind effects, stuff like that, this is just a card to consider, I think. And then 24 lands, so pretty low to the ground on the mana base too, like a rock side mana base, barring like they're running Cavern of Souls here, Fire of Industry. Having big stuff, but really just not looking to cast like a Niv Mizzet, though of course you can always dockside into it or whatever. But for the most part, trying to really cleanly, quickly get a Glenhorn win seems like are one of your other wins, with lots of redundancy, being able to like buy stuff back if something gets killed or whatever, just keep refiring it. So pretty cool list, taking advantage of some of the new cards. Then first up, looking at the top 4, we've got Freedom Waffle on Tymna Kraum. Good soup. In the creatures, we are seeing again, no Drannith Magistrate, got the clones, kind of just the standard package minus the Drannith, which is maybe that's the new standard package. Maybe it's just these 12 creatures where Drannith is not going to be a Tymna Kraum staple anymore. We'll see. Is on the Reanimate, got the One Wheel and the Deluge, and then the expected cards, the Tutors, the Mean Bets, the Means Wreck. We're still on the Dispel and the Miscast, Path and Swords, which I like, both the Red Blast, Born Fortune, Snap, no Snap back. Pretty well what I think the instants have looked like for him here recently. Artifacts, no ring, bunch of rocks, and Wishclaw. Then enchantments, we do have a new inclusion here that I haven't seen in his list before, and that is Copy Artifact. Lets you copy a Wishclaw Talisman, lets you copy a One Ring, whatever, something good in play, a defense grid, whatever you need, just a flexible card, maybe worth testing if you're even in a Tymna Kraum deck. And then we have Smothering Tithe, which he's been super high on. Like I said earlier, I think the card has been amazing in the deck. 27 lands, still in the Forbidden Orchard as well. Not a lot of changes going into the list, no new MH3 stuff, but a couple of interesting includes like the Copy Artifact. Then we've got Sergio here on Rog Sai. He just keeps getting the tops over here. Creature package has not changed much for Rog Sai. We didn't really get anything I think worth playing. I mean, I'll probably do some more looks. You kind of have to clear a pretty high bar for as a creature to be played in Rog Sai. Sorceries. Also, not really changing much. Got all the wheels, Yogg Will, both the Final Fortune sorcery effects, a whole bunch of tutors. Infernal Plunges still here. Some people had cut that for a card we're going to talk about later. And there is no Git Probe, which has been coming in a few of the decks, so not here as well. We got Praetor's Grasp. One of the main new ones that we got was Flare of Duplication, which is tailor-made for Rogue Rack decks. It is at its best and it's most available there, between there and like Magda, but it probably seems like it's most broken in Rogside because Rogside was already such a powerhouse of a deck, and getting them access to one extra tutor, right? Cast Demonic Tutor, hold priority, sacrifice Rogue Rack for Flare of Duplication. I just got 2 Demonic Tutors. Pretty good. You don't always have to hit a Nos. Sometimes you just hit a pretty good card and it's going to be good enough. Is not on the Swan Song, which has been more and more of a popular cut recently. Artifacts, we're still on the Flail and the Defense Grid and the Grinding Station. These are kind of slots that come in and out. Some people went off of Flare. Defense Grid's pretty much here to stay, I think, in any Rogside deck. I can't imagine cutting this, but Flail can come in and out, and Grinding Station some people really like, some people don't. And then no One Ring, which for the most part Rogside pilots aren't very high on. And then another new card, of course. I mean, this is like the cleanest fit for this deck from MH3, other than, you know, the Flare, is Necrodominance. Another one of these Necropotence effects. Not sure if it came out this weekend for Sergio. If I was going to play Rockside, it would look really similar to this. And then the mana base, I don't think has changed much. Undercity Sewer's still here, rocking the same land. So yeah, Rockside with a top 4 here. Then we've got Wounded Satellite getting 2nd place here on Kinnan. Deck that has fallen off a little bit, but you know Wound is not giving up on anytime soon. Any new inclusions? It doesn't look like it. No new creatures, at least from the new set. Lots of the same big flips or ones that have come in and out of the deck. We got the Nezahal, Nyx Bloom, Tidespout, Hullbreaker, all that good stuff. Linalindra, the Chimera still here, Spirit Guide. So a really similar list to what we'd normally see in the creatures. 4 of the 1-mana dorks, the Scrap Gorger and the Bloom Tender. Image no longer showing up at all now, right? Just replaced with Flesh Duplicate. So not doing that, opting to go Flesh Duplicate and Metamorph, not doing the new Drake, just rocking the old Gilded Drake. Sorceries, got the old MDFC as well as Transmute, Green Sun's Finale, Fabricate. We do see Sink into Stupor showing up here. So at least one new card. Pact, Offer, Crop Rot. Nothing especially standing out. Force of Vigor comes in and out of some of these decks. Pongify doesn't always show up. I'm pretty high on creature removal at the moment, especially if you're not a deck that's really trying to push wins super fast. Artifacts, tons of mana, and then ways to combo. We got the Moonsilver Key to go get combo pieces, Basalt, of course, Mirage Mirror. We're a great ring deck and still on the Trinisphere. I know Wounded's been pretty high on it, has liked it pretty good. Enchantments, just the Rhystic and Mystic, and then lands, we're on 24, really 26 with those 2 MDFCs. So none of the new utility lands showing up here. No Shifting Woodland, no 6 in the list, none of that kind of stuff. So pretty slim on the changes post MH3. Probably gonna maybe be some testing done, or maybe he just doesn't like any MH3 cards. We'll see, but get in here, showing up 2nd place. And then 1st place, we've got Doom DG, otherwise known as Ori, getting it done with Rogsai. Same 6 creatures showing up here. We do have the Git Probe that Ori's on. Got the Twister, Windfall Wheel. We will do the compare feature like we always do with Rogsai, but I want to just take a look and see what new stuff you're at. I knew he was on the Git Probe. I think he is not on, no, he's still on Plunge. So still on Plunge, on Git Probe. No Swan Song for him as well. Red Flare, of course, Fierce Swat. So not too many cards different, it doesn't look like, from Sergio's list. Necrodominance here as well. I know he said he didn't see Necrodominance all weekend, so he has absolutely no data on it. We'll do the compare to Sergio's list and see what we got. 2 cards different. So yeah, Git Probe for Ori, no Conqueror's Flail, and then Ori was on Twister. I didn't even realize. Sergio not on Twister. Don't blame him. I don't own one either. And he's on Wheel of Misfortune. And then kind of more surprising, I guess, Ori deciding to run the Red Flare over the Wheel of Misfortune, which I guess kind of makes sense. It is like a new kind of gas card, although what it does consistently, not sure yet. At least I'm not, but kind of misreported on Sergio saying he had all the wheels because he clearly didn't have Time Twister. So let me know down below what you think of this event. What do you think of the new MH3 cards that see play here? We didn't see any Nadus. They didn't take over this event, but Top Deck Titans, there were a lot of them. So let me know if you want to see me cover that event, talk more about that deck. Rogsai, really the deck of the weekend with 2 top 4s and a win at a 100+ player event. You'll love to see it. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.